The amino acid taurine has gained a lot of popularity over the past 10 to 15 years, ever since energy drink companies like Red Bull and Monster started putting taurine inside of their energy drink formulations. However, because energy drinks have such a bad connotation associated with their intake, taurine has also gained somewhat of a bad reputation for being something that's not healthy. However, as more and more research comes to light, it's becoming more and more evident just how beneficial taurine actually appears to be for health parameters. And so in this video, what I want to do is take a deep dive into some of the effects of taurine on the body, as well as some of the more interesting research that supports some of these health claims. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, as it turns out, taurine is actually the most abundant intracellular amino acid in the entire human body, the most abundant free amino acid in the male testes, as well as the second most abundant amino acid in the central nervous system, just behind glutamate. Now, what's interesting about taurine is that it's one of the only amino acids in the entire human body that's not also intricately involved in the production of protein, which means that taurine appears to have some type of independent function aside from the production of protein. Now, generally speaking, taurine is a sulfur-containing amino acid that's considered to be an organic osmolyte that's involved in cell volume regulation, bile salt formation, but it also plays a major role in the modulation of intracellular calcium concentrations. Now, it's also an omnipresent antioxidant and cytoprotective agent that appears to improve the function of the heart, brain, kidneys, pancreas, eyes, and liver. Now, because taurine can be synthesized from the amino acids methionine and cysteine in the liver, it is typically considered to be a conditionally essential or non-essential amino acid. However, because the enzyme that's required to create taurine in the liver is found in such small quantities, it's actually thought that the primary source of taurine is dietary intake, and is why a lot of researchers are actually pushing for taurine to be reclassified as an essential dietary amino acid. Now, the most commonly touted benefit of taurine, and the reason it is most often supplemented, is its supposed ability to improve physical performance. However, before we dive into the research surrounding this topic, I do want to give a huge shout out to one of our oldest sponsors of this channel, Let's Get Checked. Now, every time you guys buy a at-home testosterone test from Let's Get Checked, it directly supports my ability to continue to create content as long as I have. And so if you guys have ever wondered where your testosterone levels are, especially considering the extremely alarming global drop in testosterone levels over the past 50 years, I can't more highly recommend checking out Let's Get Checked. They have an awesome at-home testosterone test that they'll actually send to your door, where you can collect your sample and send it back to them, and then within a few days they'll give you results through their online portal. And so again, if you are interested in something like this, make sure to check out the description down below for 25% off of an at-home testosterone test. Now, the first meta-analysis that we're going to look at concerning the effects of taurine on physical performance is this one, where the researchers concluded that the main findings of this analysis were that oral taurine ingestion improved endurance performance by a small amount, with marginally larger effects found for the TTE trials. The secondary subgroup analysis did not demonstrate differences between acute and chronic supplementation regimens, indicating that taurine's effects were not determined by the duration of the supplementation period. Now, the authors of this study were specifically looking at the effects of taurine supplementation on endurance activity, and did note that there was a small improvement in endurance performance with the supplementation of taurine. However, what I find interesting is that they, in several points, put small improvements in quotation marks, and the reason for this, as the authors go on to explain, is that increases in time to exhaustion among adults of mixed training status are also small after the ingestion of other ergogenic aids such as caffeine. The small effect sizes noted herein therefore represent a substantial portion of the typical enhancements observed in endurance performance after months of training, or are as ergogenic as caffeine. And so even though the improvement in endurance activity with taurine supplementation was classified as statistically small, it's still just as effective as other known ergogenic aids such as caffeine, and is also roughly equal to the same amount of improvement that would typically be seen with months of training. Now, the researchers go on to conclude that, quote, the implications of this study are that human endurance performance can be improved by the oral ingestion of taurine of varying doses between 1 to 6 grams with as little as a single acute dosage. Now, the exact mechanisms by which taurine is able to do this aren't super clear yet. However, the authors do go on to note these as some possible mechanisms of action. The reasons for the improvements in endurance performance after oral taurine supplementation remain speculative. However, recent studies have revealed that acute supplementation can increase lipolysis and reduce the contribution from glycolytic metabolism, thereby altering the fuel utilization and metabolic efficiency of exercise. Others ascribe the effects of taurine to an antioxidant role, which facilitate taurine stabilizing effects in the mitochondrial matrix, thus improving the efficiency of ATP turnover in the muscle cells. And now again, it doesn't appear as though the exact mechanisms of action are extremely clear yet. However, it does appear that taurine is having some type of antioxidant effects, as well as some effects on the mitochondria that are improving beta oxidation and lipolysis, as well as glycolytic activity that's subsequently improving endurance activity. And interestingly enough, this is a similar mechanism of action that you see with L-carnitine. And so I just did a video on L-carnitine, and so if you're interested in diving a little bit deeper into this mechanism of action, I would highly recommend checking that video out after this one that dives super deep into the glycolysis and beta oxidation pathways and how those interact with both endurance activity as well as strength training. Now, on this note, there is a more recent meta-analysis that dove a little bit deeper into the effects of not just taurine on endurance activity, but also on strength training. And the researchers here concluded that the key results of this study include improvements in the following: VO2 max, time to exhaustion, 3 or 4 kilometer time trial, anaerobic performance, muscle damage, peak power, and recovery. Taurine also caused a change in metabolites, a decrease in lactate, creatine kinase, phosphorus, inflammatory markers, and improved glycolytic fat oxidation markers. Taurine dosing appears to be effective at roughly 1 to 3 grams per day acutely across a span of 6 to 15 days and 1 to 3 hours before activity, which may improve aerobic performance, anaerobic performance, strength and power, recovery, delay onset muscle soreness, and a decrease in metabolic markers including creatine kinase, lactate, and inorganic phosphate. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. However, the most important conclusion here is that not only does taurine supplementation appear to be effective at improving aerobic performance, but also anaerobic performance. Now, specifically in regards to strength and power, which is again anaerobic performance, the researchers noted this: since taurine is known to increase strength and power as well as improve muscle repair from injury, we can only theorize that taurine must play a role in muscle hypertrophy. The relationship between taurine supplementation and scalable muscle hypertrophy warrants further investigation. Now, I do think it's worth noting here that even though the researchers of this study and the authors of this paper were super optimistic about the effects of taurine on both muscular endurance, strength, as well as muscle hypertrophy, that this area of research is extremely understudied at this point. And so I do think from an evidence-based standpoint, we do kind of have to take a lot of this with a little bit of skepticism. However, what little research does exist is fairly promising at this point. Now, in regards to the effects of taurine on fatty acid metabolism, the researchers note that, quote, taurine modulates fat metabolism. Acute supplementation of taurine can increase lipolysis and reduce the contribution from glycolytic metabolism, thereby altering the fuel utilization and metabolic efficiency of exercise. Taurine plays a role in fat metabolism, inhibiting oxidative stress by improving mitochondrial function and improving mitochondrial biogenesis. Now, the authors of this paper came to extremely similar conclusions as the previous meta-analysis that we were looking at, and found that taurine could improve mitochondrial function, lipolysis, beta oxidation, which then subsequently has a positive influence on glycolytic function and strength training, but also appears to have some level of positive impact on mitochondrial biogenesis as well, which is extremely interesting. Now, when it comes to the effects of taurine on inflammation as well as muscle soreness, the authors of this paper noted this as well. Taurine could play a vital role in increasing anti-inflammatory markers. Taurine derivatives such as taurine chloramine, taurine bromamine, and taurolidine prevent vascular permeability, which often occurs during an increase in neutrophil influx and pro-inflammatory cytokine production, which is increased by inflammatory stimuli such as exercise. Taurine may play a role to attenuate excessive inflammation during recovery periods. Inflammatory markers were unaltered in untrained men with the ingestion of taurine for 21 days prior to eccentric exercise. However, with inconclusive research, taurine may be beneficial to the balance between the cytokine response and the anti-inflammatory response following exercise. Now, what's interesting about the effects of taurine on inflammation is that it doesn't appear to have any effect on inflammatory markers like many other anti-inflammatories. Many other anti-inflammatories tend to suppress the activity of inflammatory cytokines. However, taurine appears to have an effect on increasing the level of anti-inflammatory cytokines that ultimately appear to have an anti-inflammatory effect and ultimately an effect on muscle soreness as well. And while we're on the topic of muscle soreness, the anti-inflammatory properties of taurine don't appear to be the only mechanisms of action by which it's able to improve symptoms of muscle soreness. Taurine also appears to have some type of antioxidant effect that decreases the exercise-induced oxidative stress from exercise. The authors note that taurine affects skeletal muscle contraction by decreasing oxidative stress in association with decreased superoxide radical production. Further research is warranted to investigate taurine's antioxidant role after exercise in human subjects. Taurine is proposed to function as an antioxidant of reactive oxygen species and promote recovery after exercise. This may promote an improved cellular environment to tolerate exercise-induced oxidative stress. And so not only does taurine likely improve post-exercise muscle soreness through its anti-inflammatory effects, but it also appears to improve the symptoms of muscle soreness through an antioxidant effect as well. Now, aside from all these possible mechanisms of action, taurine also appears to have some type of effect on calcium in the central nervous system and in specifically the muscle tissues. And on this note, the authors note that taurine is proposed to generate several physiological effects, including assisting the sarcoplasmic reticulum with calcium handling in type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers and regulation of calcium homeostasis. These actions are related to an increase in calcium binding protein, which helps maintain high quantities of calcium in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, promoting higher availability of calcium for cross-bridge formation and muscle contraction. Now, a lot of you guys might be wondering, what the heck does calcium have to do with muscle contraction? Well, calcium is actually required by the muscle tissue in order to create muscle contractions. Calcium is released and binds to a protein known as troponin that then allows the myofibrils known as actin and myosin to kind of connect and bridge and to create the muscle contraction. So without proper calcium homeostasis, it's impossible to maintain this, especially under conditions of stress, and taurine appears to be able to improve the homeostasis of calcium in muscle tissue. Now, one of the last mechanisms of action that the researchers put forth in this paper in particular is the possible effects of taurine on glucose metabolism, where they note this. Taurine may modulate the CAMP-PKA pathways to increase insulin secretion, calcium handling, and maintain the concentrations of glucose. This is essential for exercise and performance because these pathways promote glycolysis, hypertrophy, muscle recovery, and control glucose levels. Taurine serves to regulate the expression of genes required for the glucose metabolism, stimulating insulin secretion and sensitivity. Taurine exerts hypoglycemic effects by enhancing insulin action by facilitating the interaction of insulin with its receptors. Thus, taurine can serve to increase glycogen synthesis, glycolysis, and glucose uptake in the liver of rats and mice. Now, proper glucose metabolism is obviously going to be extremely important in specifically improving strength training-based types of exercises, just because glucose is one of the main substrates for strength-based activities. And so by taurine's ability to improve the metabolic process and pathway by which glucose is utilized, it could theoretically improve athletic performance through this mechanism. Now, aside from all these mechanisms of action, taurine may also improve hydration status because of its role as an osmolyte, as well as improve blood flow, which could theoretically improve the delivery of various nutrients to muscle tissues during exercise and recovery. And so because of this, I do think that taurine may end up being at some point one of the more underrated nutrients that could possibly improve physical performance, similar to things like creatine. However, there just isn't a ton of research quite yet in humans to warrant a definitive conclusion at this point. Now, the second possible effect of taurine ingestion that I want to talk about in this video is its effects on general cognitive health. Now, this paper takes a relatively deep dive into this topic where the researchers concluded this. Exhibiting broad activities, taurine has been considered a potential therapeutic molecule, especially for neurological disorders. According to the prior discussion, it displays extensive inhibitory and regulatory roles that prove its therapeutic efficacy against CNS illnesses. Taurine modulates neurotransmission by acting on several neuroreceptors, such as GABA and glutamate and acetylcholine receptors. In addition, it promotes neurogenesis at the preclinical level, and several investigations have reported that it regulates ER stress, energy metabolism, gene expression, quality control process, calcium homeostasis, and osmosis. It shows an emergent therapeutic role against several neurological disorders in designed preclinical studies. The protective action of taurine against glutamate-mediated neural cell death is portrayed in Figure 2. Taurine displays a protective role against anxiety, depression, neurodegenerative disease, stroke, epilepsy, and diabetic neuropathy. It also protected against trauma and chemical-mediated neuronal injuries. Now, there is a lot to dive in here. However, the main point is that taurine does in fact appear to have some level of impact on cognitive health. But with that being said, I do want to dive into more deeply into some of these points, as well as some of the possible mechanisms of action. And the first one I want to talk about is taurine's possible effects on neurogenesis. Now, earlier on in this paper, the researchers note that in the developing brain, taurine has action in neural stem and progenitor cell proliferation, during which extracellular signal-regulated kinase 1 and 2 pathways may be connected to the development of synapses. Taurine influences the level of proteins such as synapsin 1 and postsynaptic density protein 95, which are crucial in the development of synapses. In another study, it demonstrated a direct action on the proliferation of stem cell and progenitor cells. Indeed, taurine elevated newborn neuron survival, resulting in improved neurogenesis in the adult. Now, aside from the general activity of taurine on cognitive health, it also appears to have a effect on neurogenesis as well. And now, brain-derived neurotrophic factor and nerve growth factor do tend to get a ton of attention as peptides in the nootropic community that can improve synaptic formation and possibly memory as well. However, taurine also appears to improve neurogenesis through some fairly novel mechanisms of action by increasing the level of some of these protein and peptides in the central nervous system that are associated with neurogenesis as well. Now, as we had previously talked about, taurine's ability to modulate the inflammatory process associated with exercise, taurine also appears to improve cognitive health and performance through mediating neural inflammation as well. And on this topic in particular, the researchers note that, quote, the anti-inflammatory activity of taurine has been described by several studies. Taurine significantly increased functional recovery and decreased glial fibrillary acidic protein accumulation. Moreover, a one-week treatment with taurine noticeably reduced levels of 17 cytokines, which are then listed. The treatment with taurine effectually reversed brain injury severity in TBI by ameliorating brain edema, elevated activity of astrocytes, and pro-inflammatory cytokines. Taurine efficiently ameliorated pathological inflammation and injury in white matter after intracerebral hemorrhage. Now, what's interesting here is that even though taurine doesn't appear to have any influence on inflammatory cytokines that are associated with exercise, it does appear to be efficient at reducing the amount of these pro-inflammatory cytokines in the central nervous system. Now, inflammation in simple terms is an immune reaction that is primarily meant to somewhat kind of take care of damaged tissues and to initiate the healing process. However, in instances of chronic inflammation, this can lead to damaged tissue on its own, which can, in neural tissue specifically, lead to damage to the neural tissue, which is going to have an obvious negative impact on cognitive health and performance. And so if taurine is able to prevent this chronic inflammation in neural tissue, it would somewhat improve cognitive health and performance to a similar degree and a similar manner and mechanism when compared to things like omega-3 fatty acids. Now, the next mechanism of action that the researchers of this paper point to as a possible reason as to why taurine is so effective at improving cognitive health is taurine's ability to possibly improve neural energy metabolism. They state that the deficiency of taurine causes a diminished complex 1 activity and disturbs energy metabolism mainly by elevating the NADH-NAD ratio, which controls energy metabolism by feedback inhibition of crucial dehydrogenases. To increase the NADH-NAD ratio, the citric acid cycle is very sensitive. 3 NADH sensitive enzymes such as alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase, isocitrate dehydrogenase, and citrate synthase are subject to inactivation by increasing the ratio between NAD and NADH. Now, I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to explain this in detail. However, in conclusion here, what we can kind of grasp is that taurine does appear to actually increase the level of NAD in neural cells. Now, NAD is a molecule that has gotten a ton of attention in the anti-aging community thanks to doctors such as David Sinclair that have brought a ton of attention to NAD precursors such as NMN as a means to increase NAD to improve longevity and increase lifespan. And now, if you've talked to anyone who has ever taken any of these NAD precursors, one of the things that they'll always note typically is an increase in energy levels. And the reason for that is NAD is intricately involved in energy metabolism at a cellular level. And so, because taurine does appear to improve NAD levels specifically in neurons, it may be improving cognitive health and performance via this mechanism. Now, one of the last and more interesting mechanisms of action that the researchers point to in this paper is taurine's ability to modulate some specific neurotransmitters as well. And to this end, the researchers note that, quote, upon binding to specific taurine receptors, taurine promotes neuronal hyperpolarization through the opening of chloride channels. In addition, acting specifically on GABA-A, GABA-B, and or the glycine receptor, it produced depressive activity as well. The activity of taurine on GABA-A receptors counters seizures mediated by a GABA-A antagonist via elevating the latency of seizures. Indeed, the inhibitory action of taurine on the GABA-A receptor elevated the level of GABA and enhances the production of glutamic acid decarboxylase isoforms such as GAD65 and 67, which are connected to GABA synthesis. Now, I've said a lot over the years about specific compounds that influence GABA receptors as well as GABA levels, but the main point here is that GABA is one of your primary inhibitory, if not the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system that has a depressive activity and counteracts things like anxiety as well as seizures. And because taurine appears to influence this receptor as well as increase levels of GABA, it does appear to have some fairly potent effects on anxiety as well as sleep parameters. Now, unfortunately, the effects of taurine on anxiety and sleep parameters hasn't been extensively studied in humans quite yet. However, this is one of the more noticeable effects with taurine supplementation. There is a notable depressive effect and anti-anxiety effect from taurine ingestion, as well as a noticeable improvement in sleep quality. But what's interesting about taurine is that not only does it appear to be anxiolytic in nature in that it improves symptoms of anxiety, but it also appears to improve symptoms of depression as well, which is fairly unique. Typically, compounds will either have an impact on depression or anxiety, but taurine does appear to have some level of effect on both of these, either through improving dopamine levels, improving BDNF levels, which is also associated with depression, or through some other unknown mechanism. And what's interesting here is that taurine appears to be so intricately involved in various neurotransmitter pathways that a lot of researchers and authors are actually calling for it to be reclassified as an innate neurotransmitter in and of itself. And so I say all of this to say that taurine does appear to be fairly potent at not just improving general cognitive health, but specifically at improving some specific aspects of cognitive performance as well. Now, the last relevant health effect of taurine supplementation that I want to take a deep dive into here is taurine's effects on testicular health as well. Now, the first thing that's worth pointing out here is that taurine appears to be the most abundant free amino acid in the testes, which does indicate that there is some type of integral role of taurine when it comes to testosterone production as well as sperm production. Now, admittedly, there isn't a ton of human clinical data in regards to taurine's effects on testosterone production and fertility. However, what little research we do have so far does appear to be somewhat and fairly promising. Now, there was actually a recent review paper that was actually published last month that concluded this. Recently, accumulating data shows that taurine has a potential protective effect on reproductive function of male animals. In physiology, taurine can promote the endocrine function of the hypothalamus pituitary testes axis, testicular tissue development, spermatogenesis and maturation, delay the aging of testicular structures and function, maintain the homeostasis of the testicular environment, and enhance sexual ability. In pathology, taurine supplementation may be beneficial to alleviate pathological damage of male reproductive system, including oxidative damage of sperm, testicular reperfusion injury, and diabetes-induced reproductive complications. In addition, taurine acts as a protective agent against toxic damage to the male reproductive system by exogenous substances. Related mechanisms include reduced oxidative stress, increased antioxidant capacity, inhibited inflammation and apoptosis, restored the secretory action of the HPT axis, reduced chromosomal variation, enhanced sperm mitochondrial energy metabolism, and cell membrane stabilization effects. Now, it is worth noting that this review paper did lean heavily on rodent data as well as some in vitro research, which typically isn't the most reliable data. However, there just really isn't any research done yet in humans in regards to testicular function and reproductive health, which I do think is a shame, and why I'm so grateful for studies like this trying to bring attention to taurine in regards to reproductive health in men. Now, I am a particular fan of taurine because of its effects on reproductive health, and specifically because of its effects on the HPG axis. It does appear to not only increase luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, which are hormones that directly stimulate sperm production and testosterone production, but it also, above that, appears to increase gonadotropic releasing hormone, which is really one of the only compounds that I'm aware of that has been shown to do this in preclinical trials. Now, it also appears to have some anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects in the testes, which is going to have a positive effect and make it easier for the testes to produce sperm and testosterone. And so, because of these two mechanisms kind of working in tandem, I would not be surprised to see some future research come out, some future clinical research that does indeed find that taurine is effective at least ameliorating hypogonadism or possibly increasing testosterone even in healthy adults. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we close this video out is dosage and possible side effects. Now, when it comes to dosage of taurine, the typical recommended dosage is anywhere between 1 to 3 grams. However, in the research, it has been shown that 6 grams can be safe, 6 grams per day, but it also appears that 1 gram appears to be just as effective as 6 grams. And from my personal experience, I actually experienced some benefit from supplementing even 500 milligrams per day. And so with taurine, I do think lower might actually be better, and it's at least going to be better on your wallet. So don't be afraid to kind of play around with dosage, starting around 500 milligrams and going up to around 3 grams per day. Now, for those of you that would rather consume taurine through food products, it is worth noting that taurine is almost exclusively found in meat products, and that would include things like red meat and specifically the dark meat of poultry, as well as organ meats and shellfish. Now, even on a high meat diet, it is estimated that the average intake is only between 200 to 500 milligrams per day. However, with a high meat diet, you can theoretically still experience some of the benefits of taurine intake through just simple food consumption. Now, if you are consuming beta-alanine, it is also worth noting that beta-alanine can cause a taurine deficiency because beta-alanine and taurine both share the same transporter in the body. And so if you are supplementing with beta-alanine, it probably would be worth supplementing with taurine as well, just to counteract the possible deficiency deficiency that beta-alanine supplementation can cause. Now, when it comes to timing your dosage, there are a couple of different options when it comes to taurine supplementation. One is to take your taurine in the evening time, because taurine does work on the GABA receptors and has some inhibitory function. It might improve sleep quality as well as reduce nighttime anxiety, but a lot of individuals do find a lot of success with taking taurine alongside stimulants such as caffeine, and it may kind of take the edge off of caffeine and kind of reduce some of the anxiety that may be induced by caffeine in some individuals. Now, it's also worth noting that taurine may also inhibit some of the stimulatory function of specific stimulants, and so if you are consuming taurine alongside of stimulants such as caffeine, this is something to keep in mind. Now, along this note, it is worth noting some of the side effects that are associated with taurine intake. Now, in the research and even online, there aren't a ton of reported side effects. However, some individuals do report that they feel lethargic when they take taurine in the during the daytime, specifically when they're consuming taurine alongside stimulants that they may already be tolerant to. You might notice a diminished effect from stimulant consumption, so that this is again something to be mindful of, as well as a drop in blood pressure. Now, some individuals do also report that they experience a drop in blood pressure. Now, in the research, this drop in blood pressure only typically happens in individuals that have high blood pressure. However, some individuals do report that they experience a drop in blood pressure even when they do have normal blood pressure, which can obviously cause some symptoms that are associated with low blood pressure. And so these are really the only two side effects that I am aware of to be mindful of. Now, always do your own research to figure out if this compound is right for you. But other than that, guys, I think that's all I have for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you are interested in getting your hormones checked, specifically your testosterone at home, make sure to check out the link down below for 25% off of an at-home testosterone test. But other than that, I think I will see you guys next time.